Our first show is War of the Worlds, the Panic broadcast, which will stream on September 18th to 19th. Can you tell us the history behind this show and how you came up with the idea for the play?
Sure. I've always been fascinated by Orson Welles, and in all the parts of his career. I just find that there's so many layers to everything that he did throughout his career, and when it comes to radio, War of the Worlds is, I think, called like the most infamous radio play of all time. So that was definitely one that I was very interested to find out, how did this come together? What was the aftermath? How much did it really happen? I mean, there have been books and books written about this by this point, but I started on this idea a number of years ago, and I knew that the actual War of the Worlds radio play, like the radio play itself, was not in public domain, so I knew that I could not use that material. So I started developing a play about the broadcast. So like a play about the broadcast without actually having the broadcast. So it would be sort of before the broadcast and after the broadcast, and what happened during that period. And ironically, around the same time, I got a call from my publisher, and they're like, "Oh, we're working with the Howard Koch estate, and we have the rights to War of the Worlds. Would you want to write something to frame that so that it's longer than 50 minutes?" And I was like, "Well, I'm actually working on that right now." So it was quite serendipitous.
The other stuff that you're working on, as you mentioned, it's all adaptations of classic films. This is an adaptation of a radio play. What was the challenge there versus the challenge of taking something that is on film and then turning it into a radio play? So radio play to radio play versus film to radio play adaptation.
Well, that is where War of the Worlds is more, it's obviously there's a parallel where it's already a radio play to begin with. And my assignment, or my what I was asked to do, was to take the actual radio play and then write something around that. So I did not make any changes or cuts within the original radio play itself. So it's probably the only one where I have not actually adapted the original material in any way. It's like the radio play itself is, I would imagine, like pretty much exactly what was on the air in 1938. But what's outside that, the rest of the piece, that went through a process where there were at least 3 very different versions of what that material was going to be. And it ended up with the version that you're doing now, which is the version that's published. War of the Worlds went through the most drafts and the most completely different ways to do it.
So we want to thank our guest, Joe Landry, who is talking about his adaptations, which are going to be part of Lincoln Park Performing Arts Center series this year. Joe, thanks for being with us. It's been a great pleasure to get to speak with you, and we'll all be tuning in for War of the Worlds, the Panic broadcast, to kick off this series.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.